Mr. President, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me, with Newsmax. It's a pleasure to see you, thank you. Russia has intensified its attacks in recent weeks, launching the largest drone strikes during the entire war. President Donald Trump says he is angry and frustrated by Vladimir Putin's increasing aggression since the start of peace talks. And he personally urged him to stop. What message would you send to the Trump administration about, so to speak, restraining the Russian president?
First of all, only Trump remains. No one could stop Putin. And we stopped him on the battlefield, not completely, the war is not over yet. But if we talk about diplomatic influence, no one has been able to do anything with Putin so far. Putin's desire to simply capture us and destroy us hasn't been affected. I give 100% that this is his doctrine, that he really wants it. He really wants Ukraine, but he wants to see Ukraine the way he sees it through his own eyes. Definitely not through our eyes, definitely not as an independent European country. And that's why Trump can stop him. To do this, Putin must lose money. And that's the only way. Losing money, he will not be able to increase both his army and spending on his army on the military sector. And he will have internal issues, that's a fact. For this, sanctions must be imposed. And diplomacy. Regarding Trump, I don't even know if he can or can't. And between us, he's the President of the United States. He must influence any aggressor in the world. Of course, Putin is one of the most dangerous aggressors.
Does the Trump administration respond to your messages, to what you are trying to convey?
They hear about sanctions. When we had a meeting in the Vatican with President Trump, we heard each other. We talked about the banking sector, the shadow fleet, and we also talked to him about oil prices. And for us, it's very important to limit the prices on Russian energy resources, specifically the price caps, because that's his main source of income. You see what happened. Israel struck Iran, and oil prices went up even more. So, there's a lot going on, not just here in Europe, but also things that later affect Europe's security. And that's why price caps for Russian oil are very important.
But are sanctions alone enough to force Putin to agree to peace?
Maybe you're right. Maybe this alone is not enough. But it is definitely a strong tool. A very strong tool. If we limit those things, very painful things. For example, when there's no way to bypass the sanctions, the components for his missiles, including ballistic missiles, simply won't arrive. If some companies, the private sector, by the way, that are on different continents don't work with Russia, and if sanctions are imposed on such companies, we clearly pass on the lists of these companies and countries to our American, British, and European partners, we share them with everyone. They all have this information. So sanctions are not just about money, they are also very important components that later ensure the ability to produce this weapon in such quantities. A terrible weapon. Iranian Shaheds, you can see how much they produce them. And the parts do not come there from Iran, but from various countries, including China. Some European companies, and to be honest, even Taiwanese companies, supply Russia with the appropriate components. I have never said that this is an agreement at the level of the leaders of these countries. This is the private sector, but leaders can implement sanctions. Total sanctions on Russia. This is a step. Second point. Today, I can tell you. The dialogue between America and the Russians. It resembles a kind of warm conversation. I don't believe that with this mood Putin can be stopped. I'm telling you honestly. I think, on the contrary, he likes it. And I believe that there should be a change in tone. Because Putin must understand that America will help Ukraine. So, first, sanctions. Second is the support of our army. And all these signals about reducing aid to Ukraine, about putting us on the same level as Russia. Even though they are the aggressor, they brought the war, and they don't want to end the war. And it is very unpleasant that we are put on the same level. And this is unfair. And therefore, I believe that such signals should be very clear. That if Putin does not end the war, strong sanctions, the strongest ones, will be imposed. If Putin does not want to return children, then Russia is a terrorist country. And this is recognized by the Congress of the United States of America. These are very important things. And in order for Ukraine to stand strong until progress is made towards ending the war, Ukraine needs to be supported with weapons. After all, this is security for the whole of Europe.
So, adding to your words, in fact, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said that the US will reduce military aid to Ukraine. This week he announced it. Have you been informed of this decision beforehand? And what impact will this have on your country?
I was not informed in advance. I still very much hope that these signals are just signals. In the end, we both understand who's the boss in the house. And that's why it's very important that President Trump doesn't confirm the words of the minister with his actions. I want to talk to him about it. We will have the opportunity, probably during the Canadian G7 summit, to talk with President Trump. These are very serious signals from the US Secretary of Defense. They are painful. Even just words are painful. Why? Because war is not only about weapon. War, first of all, is about people. The morale of these people is the most important thing. The morale of people who give their lives at the front is the most important thing. But the morale of people who are in the country, in the civilian sector, who work in support of this army, is also important. And that's why these words of the US Secretary of Defense, they are sometimes more painful than bullets. Because they are hitting the morale of Ukraine. Because if Ukrainians hear that they are on their own, that they are fighting this military leviathan like the Russians. We fight, and if we have to stay on our own, that's very painful. It definitely does not encourage, and it definitely does not support people, children, soldiers, everyone. And that's why we're going to talk about this with President Trump. There are some things without which Ukraine, I mean some things in aid packages, without which it can be very difficult for Ukraine. I will talk about it. On the contrary, I offered President Trump a package that we would buy. We are ready to buy. I spoke with some European leaders, they are ready to lend a shoulder, add funding, and these are important things for us. And they depend on America. America is such a strong country, that's a fact. For example, there are Patriot systems in the United States. And I want them very much for my people, for the protection of the civilian population. And we are talking to Europeans to find additional money for these systems. And we find that money. We already have positive developments. President Trump's approval is required.
Do you think that the Trump administration, which communicates directly with Vladimir Putin, is a problem, something that the Biden administration has generally not done?
As I told you, I think it's a very warm conversation between these teams. And I don't think I can tell President Trump how to have a dialogue. He is a president elected by the United States of America. He can do what he wants. But my position has always been, this is their bilateral relationship, but I believe that Putin does not want to end the war. And in the end, he will deceive Trump. You will see it. Everyone, the whole world will see it. He is such a person. And he is ready for some steps, for some de-escalation steps, only if he is under strong pressure, there is no other way. So I don't know what they are talking about among themselves. But what interests me, as a president, is the matter of Ukraine. I believe that it is wrong to talk about Ukraine without Ukraine. To talk about Ukraine and solve some issues without us, I think it is unfair.
You noted that the Kremlin is delaying peace talks with the illusion of dialogue. And Vladimir Putin is just dragging his feet instead of striving for peace. As a result, you called on the United States and Europe to take more concrete steps against Moscow. And you mentioned that you would like them to do so. Do you think there is any potential for a breakthrough in these negotiations with Russia?
First of all, without the United States, it is very difficult to stop Putin. And if the United States doesn't get involved in these negotiations, and if, even worse, it starts limiting aid to Ukraine, then Ukraine will have a very weak position in diplomacy with Russia. Second, Putin definitely does not want to end the war. And even if someone doesn't believe me, let's imagine. We can imagine, at some point, that this might suddenly be the case. So, Putin does not want to end the war. But he must show President Trump a positive side, so that he doesn't want to impose sanctions. Because without the imposition of sanctions, he has no limitations. If Trump imposes sanctions, Putin will definitely have limitations. Economic limitations. Yes, it will not work in the first month, in the second, in the third, but it will work. It will definitely work. And Putin today shows everyone that he seems to be in favor of a constructive, political, diplomatic path to de-escalation. This is not true. You can only agree to this with your eyes closed. And if you open your eyes, open your ears, and truly look at him as a person who came with war and will not stop. You see, it can't just be stopped. It's like a train at high speed with no one at the wheel. So it is impossible. Because he has stirred up his society through the information space, which, with all this information overload, now wants to fight. Which is pumped up against NATO, against the US, against the West. We need to go to the end, they say. These are their signals. We will go to the end. We've already had World War II once, we will go further this time. So they stirred up people like that and they don't know how to stop it. The second point is military production. In this military production, in Russia, everyone is earning and looting, and that's a fact, and it's billions. Billions of expenses. We can already see how many. Unofficial data is 300 billion a year. 300 billion a year for such production. Imagine who wants to end it. They don't want to. And these people around Putin, who produce, loot, and earn, will do everything to make sure he doesn't end the war. And if Trump manages to put Putin at the negotiating table and stop him, I have always told President Trump this would be great. It will be a semi-victory in any case. Why? Because everything is so accelerated with Putin that either he will come back after a pause or the object will simply be changed. And we do not wish war on anyone. Just no one. And that's why these are the conditions in which we all find ourselves. We are in them. And that's why I keep saying we need a ceasefire. Yes, we need ceasefire, but in addition to ceasefire, strong sanctions and a clear plan for how this war will end are very necessary. A clear plan on how to guarantee security for Ukraine, such as to prevent the recurrence of aggression.
So, returning to the topic of ceasefire. Russia noted its conditions for ending the war in the so-called peace memorandum, which was already considered as very maximalist demands. But you are still asked, Mr. President, why not accept Russia's conditions? And if you don't accept, what concessions are you willing to make in pursuit of peace?
This is the problem. Russia has written this document and it clearly understands that everything written in it contradicts both the constitution of Ukraine, the law, international law, and the will of the Ukrainian people. Now it's a war. We're not talking about desire, we're talking about justice. So it does not meet all these criteria. And most importantly, the Russians did not write it this way so that we would agree. This is important to understand. What is the approach of a person who wants to end the war? He says some things that are fundamental for him. Or he understands that there are compromises. Compromises on both sides. Everyone can be hurt, but it's a compromise. What did the Russians do? They wrote an ultimatum. The same as it was in 2022. When they stood near Kyiv and wanted to simply destroy the statehood of Ukraine. Completely. So it is just a copy of that ultimatum. Plus, taking into account that 3 years have passed and there are changes. And this is an ultimatum, so that Ukraine can never fulfill it. This is first point. Second, when we want to end the war, we cannot just give a document for Ukraine to do something. Because in any case, it is not a memorandum then. An agreement on both sides. One side saying, I want you to do this. But they are guilty. They are aggressors. They came to us. And therefore, the whole world had to give Putin an ultimatum. If you don't end the war, there will be 1, 2, 3. If you do not give money for reparations for the restoration of Ukraine, it will be 1, 2, 3. That doesn't happen either. Therefore, these are already concessions and compromise that we must sit down with the murderers at the negotiating table and agree on something. And we are ready. Because we want the war to end. President Trump has taken on a very difficult task. And he said, I will stop this war. And the first step is ceasefire. And I didn't do anything against any of his proposals. So that the United States doesn't blame us later. And no one could blame Ukraine. Ukraine has shown that it is ready to do anything for peace. Anything except the ultimatum. We are not ready for an ultimatum. And because of this, we are fighting. Otherwise it is nonsense. Why didn't we just give them the country, the flag, give everything to them when they captured us? Because we didn't go for an ultimatum. We understood that it would destroy our independence. And our country. What will happen to us? Where will everyone go? Where, in which city of Ukraine, is it beautiful where Russia came? Where, everything is destroyed. Everything is destroyed. And this is the main goal for them. And it always has been. All centuries, all wars. Tragedies, Holodomor, and so on. Everywhere they came with their power, they destroyed or killed everything. They will not be able to deport a country of many millions. Although they would be happy to do it. Therefore, they will destroy everything Ukrainian. Totally. Culture, history, people, memory. Independence. All this is called independence. Our identity. And so there can be no ultimatum. And the Russians understand this very well. And what conditions are needed for ceasefire? Let's be honest. Ceasefire, what are the conditions? Why should there be conditions for a ceasefire? It looks very, let's say, strange. And that's why President Trump took on the mission to end this war. And he must do everything to end this war.
I understand you, Mr. President. It resonates. I have to ask that, because I understand that you have to explain your position.
Yes, yes. I'm happy to do it, please. I'm just happy to do it. If you were reading these clauses. Not that it's the most important thing. For everyone. How can they talk about Russian-speaking people when they were the ones killing in the east of the country, where the majority of those Russian-speaking people who live or lived in Ukraine were? How do they raise the issue, for example, about the Russian church? Listen, this is the human will. Human will. Putin is creeping in here, under the church bell. He's telling everyone how to pray. This is the human will. One can go to church or to a mosque, synagogue, etc. This is the will of the people. And he tells how much respect should be given to the Russian church. Why? This is not even a state issue. This is a matter of the church. The state and the church are separate according to the constitution, by the way. In most countries in the world, including Ukraine. So these things he just writes to show, here's my Russian world. I am bringing it to those countries where I see their future as part of Russia. He does not consider us an independent country. And that's why I would very much like President Trump to understand this. No matter how Putin smiles, no matter what he promises him, he looks at us. Looks at us. As for prey, he looks at us and hunts us. And this is the essence of this war. And if you don't knock the teeth out of the predator, it won't stop its desire. For sure.
Let's change the topic. Given the events in the Middle East, I want to ask you about the current situation. Iran has consistently supported Russia by supplying military equipment and aiding the Kremlin's war effort. Why is Iran so committed to helping Russia destroy Ukraine? And do you think Vladimir Putin will support the Islamic Republic in the escalation of the conflict with Israel?
In any case, no one wants war and does not wish it on any region. Even though Iran, the regime, it is actually fighting against us. Transferring weapons to the Russians, weapons, technology, something else, I don't know. And that's why they are very dangerous. But despite this, we still do not wish for escalation. Because we know how any such tragedy, operation, or war can end, and what losses it may bring. But Iran helps. This is a regime that helps the Russians. And it gives weapons. And we are in such a situation. And to be honest, economically, these are also very big problems for us. I told you about oil today. Oil that helps the Russians. High oil prices help the Russians. They have money at the expense of oil and use it for war. Here's what's really happening. Will the Russians help Iran? I think they have always helped them, to be honest. The question is whether they will openly support Iran. I think it depends only on the position, the strong position of the United States of America. If the United States demonstrates a strong position, Europe will always respond to their strong position with strong support. There is no need to push away European countries. The union of the US and Europe is the strongest union. If the United States acts loyally, diplomatically, then what? The Russians will not understand this. And the Russians will understand that it is possible to help Iran. And then there will be a new wave of this war, a new escalation, about which I said that we still wouldn't want escalation, we are telling you frankly. But there will be a new wave, a new escalation, with missiles, with the help of the Russian side for Iran. This is in my opinion. But I don't know everything these guys are talking about.
Thank you for your time, Mr. President.
Thank you so much.